So really what we need to do is just delete that condition and rely on the land development code, because
On the COP condition, because they're gonna have to come through the
I
process.
love that.
Yeah,
see, we started off making you happy.
that way when they have an end user, they know where it's at, they come through the process, and there you go.
I noticed there were a couple of antiquated conditions that got kept.
Well, we're gonna talk, yeah, so on the next thing, it's the first one on my 48-hour letter, we all agree we're gonna have to give you a new MCP, so we'll have to put a new date in condition 1. Condition 2, in light of your conversation about the oil and gas, and I believe the gentleman who owns the property agrees that we don't have to put that use back in. Item number 3, this is what I call the John Ferdima condition that we don't do anymore. We agree we can take that out. 4 is the concurrency condition we don't do anymore, and we agree we can take that out. Condition 8 is the one we spent some time on, and we talked through it at lunch, and Beth agrees that this situation is different from some of the other situations, and there's 2 sides of the property, so it needs work. She's gonna take the first shot at it and then send it to us, and so we hope to work through that and have that resolved. Which leaves us with Jillian's presentation on the one condition we didn't talk about, and we don't know what we think, or if we agree or disagree yet.
Want me to come speak on it?
Yeah, just one moment. So we're at a point right now where staff's transportation expert's going to speak, and then there's a possibility that condition 12 will be refashioned following this testimony.
Correct, and I have one thing to add. So in the expert witness list that was submitted for the staff's 48, we have all of DOT transportation. We do not have Marcus Evans. Marcus Evans authored 12A, condition 12A, which is the development intensity. So if the applicant is okay with Marcus speaking on behalf of that 12A to understand why, and I let Marcus was watching, so he knows that it's on the table to be struck, but he wants to put something on the record about the why behind the condition, if that is okay with you. If you don't think you
Okay.
need anything,
It's okay with me if he wants to come explain the reasoning behind requesting that as a condition, that's fine with me, as long as the applicant doesn't object to him not being listed on the original list.
correct.
We'll accept that. I don't think we're gonna change our mind about why we don't think the condition's appropriate, but if you want to comment on it, okay.
I'd like to allow him the opportunity to.
Yes, and I spoke with the applicant before this, letting them know that this is what I was going to
did.
do.
Okay, so condition 12, though, remains perhaps in need of work, especially with regard to the signal agreement, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
And Jillian Scholler is here, Deputy Director of Transportation. She was going to speak on 12B, which is the signalization.
Okay, Jillian, would you come to the podium? I will swear you in. And then I would like you to state your full name and your position with Lee County, and then you can commence your testimony.
Okay.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you place into the record this afternoon will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Hi, Jillian Scholler, Deputy Director of DOT. I've been previously approved and would request to be approved again.
Please proceed.
The signalization agreement that was included, we've been crafting new signalization agreements throughout interactions over the last several years. The original signalization agreements that have been used in previous years have served to be very hard to enforce, especially in conditions like this where parcels will get broken up and then you end up with multiple owners. So DOT is taking a new approach in that potentially the signal gets installed prior to the need for the signal, but at least we're getting it installed so that we can ensure safety and effective traffic operations coming in and out of the developments. In this location specifically, we already have a safety concern that I've been monitoring over the last several years. There was one fatal crash involving a left turn vehicle turning from Lee Boulevard onto Sunniland, colliding with a westbound vehicle on Lee Boulevard, and there has been a pattern of both angle crashes involving southbound motorists hitting either eastbound or westbound motorists and those eastbound left turn vehicles being hit by westbound vehicles. The crash pattern right now is not at a point where I would take any drastic changes at the intersection, but it is something that I've been monitoring, and it is a concern. And increasing the traffic on this roadway will increase that concern. So we think that a signal is very justified, and we'd like to ensure in all of our documentation that we can make it happen when it needs to happen.
Okay, so my question with regard to the signal is what is anticipated some sort of proportional share contribution, or is it this applicant is expected to pay for the whole signal?
So Sunniland Boulevard is a county road, so the expectation is that the county would contribute towards the signal, and that is detail that would get worked out in the signalization agreement that would be developed at the time of the first DO. The main difference, the biggest difference between our signalization agreement and the one that they proposed is the inclusion of design. Our agreement states that they will include design with their first DO. Theirs does not. It just leaves it more general and says that the agreement, including how design and construction will be facilitated, will be worked out at the time of the first DO. So being able to get that design done with the first DO makes it a lot easier to get the signal installed, again, when it needs to be, to ensure, health, safety, and welfare for the motoring public.
And, well,
How can we have a condition that requires participation in an agreement without specifying its terms, since it seems like there's some negotiation that may occur?
well, but there's not a negotiation about the design the way they have the condition written. They have a problem now. Problem's not caused by our client. The first DO could be for McDonald's. McDonald's isn't going to be in a position, nor should they be, to design a signal for the entire project to solve the problem. That's why we wrote it more generally, because Mr. Treach did an analysis assuming maybe we had a big box retailer and a well-known grocery store, and if those uses went in, would they trip the warrants? The answer is yes. Problem is, at the first DO, this condition says I've got to analyze build-out conditions. Well, we have 2 master concept plans, so what build-out condition are we going to be looking at? To me, it makes more sense to have that at the time you're doing the DO for one or the other anchor parcels, because then you'll have a much clearer vision of what you're going to analyze. Otherwise, we don't really know what the project share is, because I'm assuming the share will be based on some look at trips. And so there's already existing background trips, and so you'd have to analyze, kind of consider the public trips and the project trips to figure out what that prop share is.
Well, what's the danger of postponing this to the point where we have a DO that triggers the warrant? What's the danger there?
It becomes hard to then rally the businesses or the property owners that have already built and did not have to be part of that signal at that time, then to come back and impart that cost or associated with the signal later after the fact, potentially 10 years down the road, whatever. In this case, I don't think it would be that long, but in a lot of cases, it's several years down the road, and there may be 2 property owners removed, and so the property owner at the time is like, I don't know anything about this, so it makes it very hard for us to then go approach all of these, however many property owners, to get the proportionate share from each of them.
This is my question. Why can't you have a signalization agreement now
I think we
that
can.
becomes incorporated into the chain of title somehow? Do you know what I mean? Applicable to this property owner and all future property owners, that yes, there's going to be a need for a signal, and all property owners are going to contribute based on their proportionate contribution to trips. Why couldn't it be structured that way? So it's going to run with the land, and anyone who buys an out parcel is now on notice that they have this potential obligation in the future to contribute toward the cost of
Yeah, I think you can do it through a covenant. I think you can do the signal agreement with the first DO. It's the design with the first DO, depending on what that first DO is. So I think there's a way to get there. We haven't had a chance to have
Yeah.
conversations,
So is the issue that DOT's position is that this signal is a site-related improvement, and for that reason, the entire cost of the design should be on the applicant?
Not necessarily. We just want them to take the initiative of incorporating the design into their first DO so that once the design is done, the construction is a lot easier to facilitate. And the desire is really for the broader developer to end up taking that cost instead of having to parse it out. Like you're dealing with one big entity versus however many small entities. It gets very complicated, and the county in our methods, we don't really have a way to facilitate that with potentially
Well,
20
you'd need
different
some kind of
owners.
covenant,
So
and still enforcement would be a challenge even under those circumstances.
yeah, so that's what we're trying to get it so that the broader developer at least initiates the signal and describes when it's going to happen and takes on their portion of the cost.
What if the county paid for the design and then the developer that trips the warrant pays for the signal?
But then potentially the developer that trips the signal is a smaller out parcel, and the bigger developments maybe don't trip it at that point, and then some small guy is now fronted the entire bill for the signal. So that's where it gets very complicated, and that's why we're trying to kind of get it done initially.
Okay, I have a question. If you take our condition and then require the signal agreement to dictate when the design's going to be done, so it can be done by the big D developer, not the little d of like the out parcel, does that work?
If we can revise it to specify when the design is going to be done, then I think we could work something out in there. Your current one, it just leaves it very general and broad, and it doesn't really specify who's facilitating what. And so, like I said, it just gets very hard to make it happen.
Hasn't this come up before?
It's something we're desperately trying to work through.
Evolving. I know the situation that Julia's talking about, it's the low signal. It was 20 years later, and she's right, it was a nightmare
And now
on
there's
both
like
sides
30
of the road.
different owners.
So they're trying to avoid that. I know what they're trying to avoid, but we've gotten a little too draconian. But I do think we can get there. And Mr. Tarish, the traffic gentleman in the back, thinks you guys can sit down and resolve it. So I'd like to leave the record open to try to come up with a condition we can agree with, if that's possible.
My wish would be to have this condition broad enough so that the signalization agreement is required, but it's gonna be negotiated off to the side. So as long as you guys enter into it, how you determine you're gonna do the signalization agreement, that's covered by the agreement, and the condition is only referencing the need for the agreement.
But the conditions that we've used over the last, 15, 20 years are in that manner, where they're very broad and they just say an agreement is needed. However, then it gets split up and the agreement is linked to the zone, but the guy that bought this out parcel isn't aware of the agreement. And so that is the problem we've had, which is why we're trying to make them more specific and really pin the original developer on it, the person that's entering into the agreement. They're the ones agreeing to this condition, not each individual owner. So we're trying to make it so that person who's agreeing to enter into this agreement is the one that enters into the agreement
And Rob
and facilitates the
Rob Price
signal.
is here to further that if you would like.
I'm just wondering if this is not a site-related improvement, why isn't impact fees covering the cost of the?
But it's not completely a site-related improvement because they've been monitoring the intersection and have problems now. So, I mean, there's a need to,
Okay.
the big guy's here.
Good afternoon. Rob Price with Lee County DOT, Director of Lee County DOT. I have testified in this forum in the past. and been
Wait,
recognized.
you're not sworn, though.
I am not sworn. Go ahead.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you enter into the record will be the truth?
Yes, ma'am, I do. I have been recognized in this forum as an expert in traffic engineering and transportation planning in the past, and wish to be recognized as such again today. So I was listening to the line of questioning that you were asking of Jillian, and the way that your questions seem to be leading us is a way that we've been doing things in the past. And it's just been proven to be an accounting nightmare for the county. I'll give you an example. At Plaza del Sol and Corkscrew Road, there was a signal that was warranted at that location. There was a signalization agreement that was put on the development on the south side of Corkscrew Road. There was a Lowe's that was developed there. There was a Ruby Tuesdays, a bunch of out parcels, and those had been in operation for years and years and years. Ownership of those had changed hands multiple times over the course of time. And so as we went back to try to approach those property owners to get them to pay their share of the signalization, it was a nightmare. And the village of Estero ended up having to step up and actually pay a good portion of that traffic signal. So we don't want to get stuck holding all the bag. We understand that this is a county road, and so the county does have a part in funding a traffic signal at this location. What we're trying to do is work with the developer to accomplish getting the signal installed in a timely manner when it's needed and when it's warranted through an agreement. And the question that you just had about impact fees versus site-related impacts, I think we need to get that on the record too. So impact fees are not eligible to pay for traffic signals. Impact fees are used to increase or enhance capacity on a roadway. A traffic signal will actually reduce the capacity of the roadway. So when you have a site that is causing the need or furthering the need for a traffic signal, it really kind of is a site-related impact, a site-related improvement. Now, I think when Jillian was answering your question earlier, this is not solely 100% their responsibility. And that's what this one's a little bit unique. A lot of times when we're in a situation like this, you have a development that they want to signalize their driveway connection to a county road. And in that case, it is 100% the responsibility of that property owner to pay for that signal. Design, construct, soup to nuts, the whole 9 yards. In this particular case, the county is trying to recognize our responsibility that this is a county road, and so we do have some skin in the game here. Our goal was having that design done with that first development order will expedite the construction of the signal when it's needed to go in.
So who pays for the signal then when it's time to go? If they incur the cost of design, when the time comes to install and construct the signal, who pays for that?
So we would look at whatever we work out from a existing traffic and what the responsibility is for the county for the background traffic versus their development and what their impacts are. We would factor all of that in, and the design costs would also go into that proportionate share. So if they fronted the design, their cost at construction would be a little bit less. It would be less. That's our intent, is having that design in place allows us to implement that signal faster. If we get to a point where we have a demonstrated safety issue at this intersection, it needs to be signalized, and we don't have a design, I've got to go out and get a design cut. It's going to take me a year and a half potentially to go through the procurement process, to get an engineer to do the design and get the design set up. We have a demonstrated safety problem, we're closing the median. I mean, that is going to be our first step. If we have a safety issue to address, we're going to close this median and restrict all lefts out. And I don't think the developer wants that, and the county doesn't necessarily want that either. I can tell you that if this was 100% the county's responsibility to do something at this intersection and there was a demonstrated safety issue, we'd go out and we would close the median, allow no left turns from the side street, and we probably would just walk away, and that would be the fix. We would never signalize the intersection. I think the developer would like to have the signal. We are okay with the signal. It's an appropriate location for a traffic signal. So however we can work out the mechanics of getting the signal designed and installed and share the cost, that's what we're really trying to achieve here.
So the rub is to make sure that the responsibility to pay doesn't fall entirely on one parcel.
That's correct. When we do an agreement and we have these developments as each out parcel develops, acknowledge that there's a signalization need and that they're going to have to pay their fair share. I mean, oftentimes you have a developer that develops whatever goes on that lot, and then they sell it, and then the next person might sell it. And while that runs with the land, and we can all say that, it's the mechanics of actually getting that money that cause problems for the county. It's just it becomes a nightmare to try to collect. This is the whole genesis as to why we're looking at changing how we administer these signal agreements.
Has the county office been consulted on a possible way to accomplish this goal?
I mean, you know, we talk to them about these things all the time. We've had multiple conversations with them regarding other cases. I don't know if we've spoken specifically about this particular case. I mean, we're happy to leave the record open and work with the developer and try to see if we can come up with a way to achieve a signalization agreement that works and that you're comfortable with and that they're comfortable with and that we're comfortable with.
My concern is enforceability from a zoning standpoint. That's my main concern. I don't begrudge LDOT from wanting this contribution, all the testimony that I've heard from Jillian. I understand that, but I'm dealing with crafting a condition that if it's not complied with is basically going to stop all development approvals on this project. So I want to be very careful how this condition is crafted, and that's why that would be easier to do if you can come up with a method for financing this.
Well, see, I think we can, I go back to what I said to Jillian and I say to Rob. We understand the problem, we understand the goal, we understand what's happened in the past, because some of us have been involved at the various phases of that. We don't want that to happen again. We just got to sit down and work through some language, and if we have till, what, next Thursday or whatever the time we have to do that, I think we can. If that's okay with Rob.
Is that satisfactory to you?
Sure, yes, it's satisfactory with us. I mean, we also, it is not our intention and our goal to shut the development down. That is not what we're trying to do.
Just so that you understand my perspective, I don't want to put a condition in here if it can't be enforced. So it has to be enforceable. Now, typically when a condition is not complied with, it's either a code violation or the condition itself provides some kind of consequence for failing to comply.
Mm-hmm.
So if I don't have a condition that does one of those two things, it's like, why is it in here? So I want to make sure that we can find some wording that is satisfactory to you all, that accomplishes this goal that you both want. Because I understand what you're saying. This project will work better if there's a signal at Sunniland. You know, otherwise the circulation is not ideal.
We should probably cut those trees down.
And it's not a situation where they can front end and get credit on impact fees. You've explained that to me. So this is something separate.
Right. You're correct. We agree, and we will do what we can to work with the applicant.
Okay. Well, we were leaving the record open for submission of additional updated documents and conditions, so maybe we'll leave the record open 2 weeks so you can continue to discuss. And just a suggestion that maybe you involve one of the assistant county attorneys in this endeavor. They may have some insight that could be helpful in terms of accomplishing the goal.
If we meet with Ms. Montgomery, we have to have the county attorney's office involved, so
I heard that.
they'll be involved.
That's a rule.
They insist they need protection, I don't know why.
Yeah, the file's been marked.
But I'll also commit to that we'll work with, outside of this case, I mean, we acknowledge that this is a recurring topic of discussion. This one's a little bit different because obviously we know it's a county maintained roadway where we're talking about having the signal. It's an intersection of two county maintained roadways. But we will fully commit to you that we'll try to get with the county attorney's office and see if we can come up with a better mechanism in the future. I mean, we don't like these signalization agreements as much as the developers don't like them either. But in this particular situation, it's a little different because we do recognize we have some skin in the game.
Could it be an MSTU or MSBU where you set up?
Well, that's what happened in Estero. That's what they ended up doing with an MSTU. So yes, it can
Get
be
the
done.
money and then,
It could be. I mean, that could be the mechanism. It's something that we've kicked around in the past as a possibility, but it's about implementing the MSTU, getting the funds, getting the design, getting the construction. A situation like this, it might make more sense to do that. Where we're talking about a shopping center development or a residential development where it's their driveway to a county road, I would say the cost is 100% the developers. And so it's really about a timing thing. And our goal with the way that we've been doing these is we're not trying to say day one you must build and construct a traffic signal. It's when it's needed. You tell me when it's needed. We'll we'll work on the conditions and we'll work on the DO stipulations so that the timing is based on what the developer says their traffic study says is when the signal is going to need to go in. We will condition and stipulate the DO that it be in before we issue another CO or CC past that number. And I think that gives them the flexibility to start developing, start generating some revenue to help pay for the traffic signal, and then we can all be happy at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think we can get there. Right now, it's tied to a CC for 300 units, but to Rob's point, Ted may say it's sooner, so we'll work on it.
Okay, sounds good. You got anything else?
no, thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it. I'm going to leave the record open for 2 weeks for you to continue to talk and resolve something.
All righty.
Jillian, thank you. Is there any further testimony from DOT?
Marcus with Development Services.
Marcus, I'm going to administer the oath, and then I'm going to ask you to state your full name and your position with Lee County. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you enter into the record will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Marcus Evans with Lee County Department of Community Development, Development Services. I am a licensed professional engineer with the department and have been accepted as an expert in planning, or transportation planning and traffic engineering in the past.
Okay, I understand you're going to explain a condition that's been recommended by you?
That is correct, yes. The purpose of the condition, I think overall, is to promote transparency with respect to the site's trip generation. And when we consider a public hearing, obviously, transparency is very important as we present information to the public, and not only to the public, but yourself and the county board as well. So we certainly have an accountability when it comes to presenting information that is understandable, and then also that it's the picture that's painted is something, again, more in the planning phase, is something that can be related to very well in the actual final development. So that being said, if I could, I'd like to go back to Chapter 34 of the Land Development Code, and that describes in Chapter 34-378 the effect of plan development zoning. Paragraph or subpart B, the applicability of development regulations. There it states in part that this section must be interpreted to apply to and applied such that no approved use will be vested as to density or intensity unless the proposed density or intensity is specifically reviewed and approved during the plan development process. So again, that's the effect of plan development zoning. So that intensity is really important to consider. Now, intensity, again, looking at the Land Development Code, Chapter 34 Section 34-2 defines it as such. It says it means a measurement of the degree of customarily non-residential uses based on use, size, impact, bulk, shape, height, coverage, sewage generation, water demand, traffic generation, or floor area ratio. So traffic generation is described in the meaning of intensity. So when it comes to intensity as considered through the plan development process as referenced in 34-378, it's important that we consider that, and that as we look at the traffic study, that that is something that is more considered a worst case scenario. And if it's not a worst case scenario, that there are conditions that that account for the reduced worst-case scenario, you might say. So that brings us to this particular case. In this case, as with many others, there's a very long schedule of uses. A lot of different uses can be built on this or in this development. Now, that being the case, it makes it difficult with the traffic study preparer as well as staff to identify what is a worst-case scenario. We have a lot of different uses. We have a lot of different trip generation for each of the uses. They're different. Then we have internal capture. We have pass-by. There's a lot of different elements, a lot of different gears that are turning as we look at an analysis for trip generation. So when I looked at this schedule of uses, my big concerns were some potential development that perhaps might be more of a worst-case scenario than that was considered in the traffic study. The two in particular that caught my attention was the school. Now, a school, a large school in particular, can generate a lot of traffic. And we have a school right next to this. If for whatever reason the school district decides, well, wouldn't that be a nice place for maybe a middle school or high school? We can share some of our administrative operations with the nearby elementary school. Hey, good spot for a school. The trip generation for a school, very high. So if a school were to develop on this site, my sense is the numbers that were looked at in the traffic study might be on the low side, not accounting for a potential school there. In addition to that, if the footprint of the commercial portion of the development were to be reduced from the 265 to say 150 or so, and there were to be a grocery store as an anchor, trip generation really jumps. And so that again is a potential concern. For instance, a commercial development of say 150,000 square feet without a grocery store is a certain value for trip generation, but if we add that grocery store to that mix, then the trip generation may jump up to 1.5 times what that initial 150,000 square foot commercial development without the shopping center would generate. So this condition, I believe, again, promotes transparency, and it's understood that, hey, if a school decides to locate here, if for whatever reason the commercial footprint were to be reduced and then the remainder of the floor area is built as office or some other uses, and then the grocery store is added to that mix, that again, the picture we're painting to the public, the picture we're painting to yourself, the county board, perhaps others that may have interest here, is understood that what we looked at in the traffic study is the limit. That's the intensity. That's the intensity, in my opinion, that is considered through the plan development process, which goes right back to 34-378.
So how is this not accomplished by condition 1, which sets the development parameters for the project?
I'll give a good example, and this is something that we've seen a number of times. Let's step aside and look at a development, a hypothetical situation. Say we have a development, a residential plan development. It's approved for 1,000 dwelling units, and simply in the description in the resolution, it says that it's approved for 1,000 residential dwelling units. You look at the schedule of uses, you see maybe a handful of different types of residential units. You have single-family detached, you have single-family attached, you may have multifamily, you may have townhomes, and then the site development regulations give you some idea of your heights of your multifamily and so on. If you just simply have an approval, a carte blanche approval, 1,000 dwelling units, and you look at the schedule of uses, technically, if they wanted the most intense in terms of trip generation, they could build 1,000 single-family detached homes there. But the reality is that if then you look at the traffic study, and the traffic study looked at 500 single-family detached homes, and then a mix of, say, single-family attached, multifamily, and townhomes, your trip generation in the traffic study is going to be a decent amount less than what you would see with the actual development of 1,000 single-family detached homes. Now again, every site's different. You may not be able to fit everything that the zoning might allow on that site.
What would be different? They would pay impact fees based on their impacts tied to the impact fee schedule.
This
This
is
is what
true.
I'm struggling with. What changes by adding this condition in terms of mitigation or otherwise?
If that residential development, or say this development, was in an area where there was very contentious, very concerned citizens that live in that area, and you paint the picture perhaps that this is gonna be a fairly sublime and a fairly low trip generator, and then all of a sudden what develops there is a much higher trip generator, the public trust, I think, is very important, and I think that through the public hearing process, the transparency and all, that we should be concerned about that. And I think, again, it goes right back to this 34-378, where it talks about.
What does this condition accomplish for us?
It makes sure that what the public is told, what the board is told as far as the traffic in that area and the issues perhaps with accesses and delay and so on, that carries over to what actually gets built.
Okay, thank you.
That's my concern, and whether, I've made it clear enough or it's shared that that's understood, it may not be, but,
I appreciate you coming to clarify.
all right, very good, thank you.
That is all.
That is all. Anything further from DOT? No?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. If there's no questions by the applicant, I'm going to move to public at this time. Members of the public, I'm going to call your name one at a time. Please come to the podium, state your name, and share your remarks with us. Rahim Ahmadi.
Hello,
Thank you for coming.
thank you. My main concern is that I read over the traffic impact statement, and there's no mention of the impact on Terry Avenue in regards to the increase in traffic. And so currently, if you're trying to go westbound onto Lee Boulevard going into Fort Myers,
So what road can you,
Terry Avenue,
you can approach and show me where?
yeah, yeah, right here. So I own this property right here on Terry Avenue.
Okay.
And so in order to leave in the morning, this is the only median between Gunnery and Sunshine that has full access with a U-turn, left turn lane from both ways. And so in the morning rush hour and the evening rush hour, it is next to impossible from Frogger to get onto Lee Boulevard. The traffic backs up in the morning, and then on the way home with 50,000 cars a day traveling, it's pretty tough to get onto Lee Boulevard. And on top of that, when you're trying to head home around 5 o'clock, this turn lane prevents you from even leaving because it will kind of block your median.
So if you were to make a right and head to the next signal and make a left turn, U-turn?
You could, yeah.
Okay.
And so that's a possibility, but with Sunshine being the next turn, and then with the extension of Leap to the Sunshine, that's going to be a horrendous U-turn to make, as it already is. And so, my concern is really how does, if there's a McDonald's there, I'm going to be there every day, to be honest. And so I now have to fight, how much residential properties are here that have to fight additional traffic now to get to this commercial use. And so my main concern is that nothing in the traffic, all the traffic study really details this intersection and this here, but it doesn't include how do people make left turns. Is this going to be closed out? They did mention that this probably right here, which is really a dead U-turn, will be closed. I think that was in the traffic study, but doesn't account for how do people, from really Yvonne. There's a block here on Yvonne that technically you can't make a right to do U-turns. So all this traffic from Yvonne all the way to Sarah really uses Terry Avenue to access Lee Boulevard, or you got to go all the way down to 8th Street to then get to Sunshine, where there's a traffic light, and then go north. So it really makes it difficult. So my only main concern is just there was no Terry Avenue. I personally think there was a fatality in March. 2 people died in Sunniland in March of 2024. There was another fatality on Terry Avenue. I've personally seen 3 accidents at this intersection, just anecdotally with my own eyes. So I don't know how many accidents there's been between Sunniland and Terry Avenue, but you're literally paying Frogger to take a left turn to go
Could you take Fourth to Gunnery and go that way?
No, it stops eventually, and so you could technically go and then do another turn and do a, but then you're talking about increased traffic on arterial roads too. And there's really very little mention of it in that traffic impact statement. And so that's my main concern is how do we incorporate for the increased traffic for all this commercial use? If you the rumor mill was at the Publix, and then I heard that that's not the case anymore. But and so that is the prior statement about if it is a grocery, you're going to increase so much intensity of people trying to make a left turn into this development. And so you're really going to force them to go all this way down here to do a U-turn, and you're going to increase all this traffic on arterial roads for all the southbound traffic. And so my main thing is safety from, I own a house that's 37 feet forward, it's been hit by a car already. Exactly.
So this lot you spoke of on the corner there, is that a commercial business?
No,
that
it's a
you own?
house.
It's a home, okay. Well, we will have the transportation engineer or planner for the applicant illuminate that
Yeah,
for
just
you.
if they can maybe incorporate just traffic, how is Terry Avenue impacted with the increased density of people trying to go to this large commercial space?
Okay,
Yeah, that's
we'll
my-
ask them to clarify that, thank
Okay,
you.
fine, Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deborah Wilkinson? Wilkinson?
Wilkinson.
Thank you for coming.
Please bear with me. This is my first time ever attending this meeting and speaking. For the record, I would like to say that Mr. DeLisi was incorrect when he said that the residential area was unbuilt. I live on 6th Street and my house and lot butts along the drainage ditch that runs along the west side of the property being developed, and you can see it.
Okay, show me where you're talking about so I can visualize.
Sixth Street, this is you.
Okay,
And this is a drainage ditch, it's not a canal. It's much more narrow than the canal. And actually, most time of the year, I mean, I loved it when Ian was here, it was water. But otherwise, most time of the year, it's dry. People wildlife cross it all the time. But not a lot, because it's vacant land right now. Once it's built up, you're gonna see people wandering around in their neighborhoods. And I'm speaking on behalf of my neighbors. They all work and they get dock pay. I'm being paid for a day off, but nobody can afford it. And they're all with children that go to the schools around.
so your concern is,
Well, concern is there's not gonna be a buffer to stop any human trafficking walking, when you've got all these people. My other concern is, just so many.
can you return to the
Yes.
podium so we can get you on the microphone?
Okay.
Okay, so the first concern is
There's
the
not gonna be a
buffer
buffer.
between the residences off of 6th Street West and the
The
site.
commercial, correct. And I understand the property will be developed without a buffer on the west side. I already explained all that. It's smaller. We get wildlife crossing over. We've even had a gopher tortoise cross over onto my street, and I didn't have a fence there before. I'm walking in the yard. The dogs were at it. My husband stopped and protected it and took the tortoise back over through the drainage ditch over there. We do
You
get.
just increased that turtle's day's work now. He's gonna have to cross again.
Well, that's but that's where his home is. He was out for a walk. But we've had neighbors. We've seen people walk across it. That was one concern. The other concern is, sorry, I'm trying to.
Take your time.
I'm on well water. How will these buildings, including the 300 multi-dwelling, get their water? My concern is my well drying up, as I've seen in many areas in Southwest Florida. Even San Carlos Park neighborhood, I'm on their neighborhood watch. I've got friends and family living there, and her well dried up. She had to re-drill because of the development around there. I'm very concerned about that, and with all the water being developed, are we going to get sinkholes like they have in the Claremont area? It's a concern. With a 300 multi-dwelling, we can expect approximately another 450 cars on the road in the neighborhood. Right now where I live, we're all workers. We're blue collar, white collars, but it's not really a retirement community. And the public transportation, everybody's got a car, at least per person in the house. So now during rush hour, Lee becomes a parking lot due to congestion. We're not even talking about car accidents. There's been times when I didn't know how I'm going to get to Bonita to work. It's backed up everywhere. And many cars are divert. Because Lee's a parking lot, many cars divert onto Fifth Street. Fifth Street, it's considered, I guess, 2 lanes, but it's really very narrow. And at nighttime especially, it's dark. There's not many streetlights. And it's only residential homes, and there is a child daycare that backs onto Fifth Street. Fifth Street is where the school bus pick up the kids for school, drops the kids off. I see it in the morning. A lot of times I end up driving down Fifth Street because Lee's backed up, and then get onto Lee to get to Fort Myers, Bonita. People walk their dogs on Fifth Street. They take walks. I mean, it's a residential area. Walk their children. So that's a major concern with the traffic, because the minute Lee is backed up, people are going to take Fifth Street. Where are all those cars going to go? It's go north. Sunniland, it's just 2 lanes, but Fifth Street is much more narrow than Sunniland, and we don't have a whole lot of streetlights. I've already witnessed 2 accidents. I'll show you. This is Zelda. There's a stop sign. I've already seen 2 fender benders in rush hour trying to get to work. And I'm thinking, well, I can't even get out of my neighborhood. And it's just traffic. I don't know what to say, but I'm scared. The excess traffic is a danger, and it must be taken into consideration when we're going to develop. I know that land's going to be developed, but a 300 multi-development is scary. Okay, I'm trying to, bottom line, by bringing this type of development into our residential neighborhood, I'm concerned of the loss of nature and a natural environment in our community by replacing it with concrete, becoming an eyesore and hurting our wildlife. Right now, I can look, I mean, it's nature. You're just going to put buildings, and after a while, it's going to be run down, but take a look around what we do. I'm concerned of my property value dropping, of my well water dropping or disappearing, of traffic volume rising to the point that we will not be able to evacuate in a timely manner when needed. Hurricanes. Also of the crime growth and of the growth that it will impact on our police department and our fire department. Thank you.
Thank you. The last paper I have is Marcia Ellis. Good afternoon. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Marcia Ellis for the record. So I'm speaking as someone who has given comment numerous times at the MPO board citizen meetings and technical meetings with concerns for the coordination regarding transportation, with special concern regarding coordinating with the school district, which is of grave concern here with such close proximity to the elementary school. I also want to speak from the standpoint of someone who is also very concerned about the future of wildlife in eastern Lee County, with specific interest in the gopher tortoise population, and accurately surveying those population and giving the good people of Lehigh Acres the opportunity to have coexistence with gopher tortoises, like communities in Marco Island enjoy, where gopher tortoises live on multiple properties. Audubon has come in and bought land to add to that. And in places like Cape Coral, which underwent their own survey in order to accurately document and protect the gopher tortoises, to give everyone in the community the opportunity to enjoy that quality of life benefit from interaction with the wildlife. I can't imagine the grief that citizens like Deborah, the children who live in this area and attend Sunshine Elementary will experience, the trauma that they'll experience of having this property turned into concrete, and the thriving population of gopher tortoises removed. That's a horribly traumatizing thing to think about. So I just want to jump in first and address the some of the things that the folks from Lee DOT talked about, because it's in my margin at the top. I do agree that the primary problem is that not all the out parcels will go at the same time, so it's truly a timing issue. That asking the development to sort of self-certify and say, oh, what, looks like we have a traffic problem now, when they're probably long gone and it's changed ownership hands, is not really realistic of what's happening. This policy is allowing developers to go off scot-free and then later stick it to the folks that bought the property down the road, really across the county. I think that we have an obligation to minimize conflicts and to be preventative in community development. Community development means that we're being wise and in thinking ahead, knowing the problems that have happened in the past. Yeah, precedent's important, but so is, honest reflection on what the problems are and what we should do about it. I've also given comments in front of the school board twice with concerns for safety, asking for the school district to participate with the Metropolitan Planning Organization to coordinate to close these gaps. I have several concerns. I would like to reserve comments on the outstanding issues that the record is being left open on, for new evidence pending future conditioning, changes to the MCP in response to any answers to posed questions that have come forward today or questions that I will pose. And I will say that I do not see this development as being consistent with or compatible with the surrounding neighborhood per the Land Development Code or Lee Plan. I would also like to say that the information as it's presented and the fact that we have all of this outstanding violations and basically a lot of movement to try to abate violations, it sort of paints a muddied picture. Things aren't very organized or clear to provide that level of transparency for the public to know actually what's going on. I'm very concerned about this intensification of use over what was previously proposed in 2006, and the fact that those preserve areas were pretty much leveled. Fundamentally, there are coordination gaps between Lee County with the school district, the MPO, especially looking at the bike ped element, since we have a school in this neighborhood and we have children who live within 1 mile are not provided bus services. So the elementary children that are within 1 mile are walking and biking to the school. The broader transportation issues regarding the fatalities that have been brought forward in accidents. The danger is clear, present, and now. There's a lack of coordination between South Florida Water Management District. I noticed that they closed their violations, but it clearly has not been resolved. Coordination with FWC regarding the gopher tortoises. Those are not registered on their online survey. I checked at lunch. From historical, when they their burrows were destroyed during the land clearing, or now. I question whether or not that the FWC has been informed of these violations so that they can pursue enforcement, since Lee County is not taking care of their duty and responsibility. There's coordination among code enforcement, and there lacks clarity in terms of their role in all of this. We heard today that there are no liens or penalties, and that's for illegal land clearing activity and harms that have occurred to threatened species. When we kick the can down the road through development orders, we're really losing that opportunity to compel that the right and ethical action be taken. We want to do the right thing, and we do that by closing the coordination gaps, by compelling cooperation and working out these issues, the transportation issues and other issues. I see some fatal flaws in the documentation. For instance, attachment L with the FGUA letter, regarding availability of services does not give the correct square footage or description of the property. In Owens Environmental, there's some confusion around the future of the cabbage palms that would be removed. Those are not to be included in the final count. This really bothers me because they're not looking at the areas that are most suitable for indigenous preservation. At this point, it's sort of recreating something artificial. When we have cabbage palms and all of the species that are already living at this site, it's not just about the gopher tortoises, but more about that later. There's no environmental testing around the oil well or where the dumping occurred. And so there needs to be environmental testing so we can understand what's in the soil, as well as a minimum 10-foot groundwater well to see what's in there. We have folks that are drawing from water source nearby. Recently, it has come to the attention at the Gulf Coast landfill that we have PFAS contamination in excess of 70 nanograms per liter that requires survey and monitoring of met wells within 1 mile. So we need to get a handle on what was in that dumping, and we want to know what that oil, how much oil, and this would not just be for PFAS, this would be for other things, the benzenes, whatever is associated with oil wells, what the protocol is, and have the FDP involvement on that. This is a matter of public health, life, and safety. The 2006 plan, it seemed to integrate the gopher tortoise preserve areas. It really makes me sad that we are, 18 years down the road and we're going backwards. There was more of an opportunity and a recognition of the coexistence potential, especially next to an elementary school. The indigenous areas were in line with the natural topography. The applicants has an omission, and what I would like to see, and I think this is necessary for making any determination, would be, I want to see where those surveys are. He clearly conducted a gopher tortoise survey. I should be looking up here, and I should see where those burrows are marked on the property. Without that piece of information, how can you make a determination about where to put an indigenous preserve, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that methodology. There's a vagueness of what's proposed as the options. We're presented scenario 1, scenario 2, are we going to have 300, apartments or not? So this prohibits the public from being able to give any kind of meaningful, competent or substantial evidence, including to be specific on the adverse harms when we're being presented 2 different options. Storage units. Storage units really appear to become a vehicle to gain entitlements, right? So let's talk about what are the benefits from a developer's perspective about the storage units. Well, you're getting in 10,000 square feet, right? It's going to figure lower on your traffic trips, right? And then later, just like your experts spoke from DOT and Mr. Evans, then later, whenever they put in a 7-Eleven, that happens to be drawing in a lot of traffic at the same time as the elementary school, you've got a problem, right? So this is just a vehicle, it's just a guise. Really, when we have to look at it both ways. You have to look at these traffic studies not just in isolation of what's being proposed, but within the responsibilities of being next to an elementary school and in residential areas that are full of children. With the school next door, yes, we have to look at the schedule of uses in detail to limit increased risk and find compatible uses. This is what community development is all about. It's about development, not entitlement. It seems like what was advertised to the public is not consistent with what has been brought forward, including the violations, including how it was presented to the planning board, the presence of the gopher tortoises. There are real issues with how this was represented to the public that I don't think fully is getting the folks here that need to be here in order to represent their interest. Let's talk about the coordination gap on gopher tortoises. So I'm going to just kind of leave that open as a topic, but we're hearing about no penalties for folks who destroyed habitat of a threatened species. No hearing is occurring. In Charlotte County and Cape Coral and surrounding counties, they have stronger ordinances that protect the gopher tortoise. They take it seriously. And so we are living in, as a result, we're having places like Lehigh Acres that are primarily ideal for gopher tortoises. There's a lot of upland and scrub habitat. Those tortoises are suffering because of the perception that's coming out from this county that they don't care enough to prosecute people. They don't care enough to enforce on behalf of the gopher tortoise. They don't care enough to look at their ordinances and straighten them out like the other counties and municipalities have to protect the species. The public information meeting occurred in June of 2023 in the summer. All right, so it would have, you have an elementary school next door, right? Those are the folks that you want to hear from on these matters of transportation. You want to hear from the folks that live in the community. So I see that as that really makes me question the good faith. If you have a public information hearing, no one knows about it. Folks that are here today that are living contiguous, the folks over at Sunshine Elementary, I called them at lunch, they had no idea. So I don't think that the effort that we saw to engage the public was good faith. In matters of the kids moving onto the school property, and a comment that Mr. DeLisi made regarding the gate. Having been a teacher at a local middle school off of Gunnery, with a neighborhood directly back behind, right back by the stormwater pond, security staff goes out, they open that gate, and the kids come in from that community through the back way, by the pond, across the field, into the school. Right, so there's coordination. That's what you want to do. You don't want kids out on the road. Yeah, that neighborhood, you could force them to get out on failing Gunnery Road and walk and bike, but why would you when there's another option? We want to protect our kids, not force them out on Lee Boulevard. I'm very concerned about the response times to any emergency, including any lockdowns that we might have at the school in response to the increased threat of people moving onto the school property from the commercial and intensification of various uses. That concerns me. You have kids, families moving across this property. I haven't seen any effort whatsoever to try to take that into consideration and in good faith work with the community. So when we look at this traffic study, all right, and the modeling that is coming from it, we have to consider what's next door as well, which is a high trip use, as Mr. Evans so rightly pointed out. So we have to look at two things at once, and we can do that. I mean, I think that was well within our capacity. With the gopher tortoises, I'm very concerned about opportunities for coexistence in Lehigh Acre. Gopher tortoises have over 360 species that live in their burrows. They are a keystone species. So 360 other species are known to live in there, including the endangered, this is the federally endangered indigo snake. So we have a nexus in so much as that we have wetlands on the site. We have impacted gopher tortoises, and we have the impacts on the commensal species, the indigo snake. In terms of mechanical clearing, there are serious problems with bringing in machines to clear an area this dense with gopher tortoise burrows. Gopher tortoise burrows are not always easily visible. They have to be walked, they have to be hand walked. This is a very dense population. I don't know of another place in Lehigh Acres with this many gopher tortoises. And we've been conducting active surveys on this and recently wrote to a grant to look at the GIS mapping of the gopher tortoise populations in Lehigh Acres. So what happens is the females, when they have a nest, or the juveniles, obscure as an adaptive strategy the front of their burrows, right? They're hiding. So it makes it particularly difficult for any kind of machinery to catch.
Object at this point in time.
Yes.
Condition 9 of the staff report says machines are prohibited, so I don't think we need to discuss machines.
No, I read that back carefully. So the way that it's described, it says no machines within 50 feet of a known burrow. I don't think that is enough, as stringent enough to protect the gopher tortoises. I don't think that what has been brought forward by Owens is as stringent as needs to be, particularly with the reputation in Lee County of not enforcing and giving oversight. So I would just like to say that that there are some additional elements that could be put in to make sure with this dense of a population that they're properly attended to.
I can answer that question when the time comes.
Okay.
Great, thank you, you're welcome. So the mechanical clearing is an issue. I also want to talk about the idea of the receiver sites and the fact that our gophers are being relocated up to Arcadia. This has come to attention lately. We've posed some questions regarding the status of Gator Hole off of Corkscrew Road, which is a receiver site, and received some vague responses that they were full. When I drove past Gator Hole yesterday, unfortunately with the road clearing, I saw they had the gates open and equipment in there, so I'm concerned about the management of the receiver sites. I know it's been discussed that Bob James is potentially going to open up, and that I agree that when we're talking about taking such a healthy, vibrant population of gopher tortoises, we don't want them to go up to Arcadia to a farm field that's been restored. I think we owe them more than that for certain. There's a coordination gap that fits within the context of Lehigh Acres. This is one of the few parcels that's of this size. But any parcel that is less than 5 acres does not require a survey. And that's why they're being entombed and they're being buried throughout this area. So that's a stressor over this whole population. This just happens to be one of the sites where they hired Mr. Owens to come in and do a survey. But tortoises are being entombed and buried throughout Lehigh Acres. And I think that's important to recognize in terms of how we can best protect and manage the species. It's clear looking at the MCP as it is brought forward, especially compared to the 2006, that the placement of the indigenous preserve is for profit, not for preservation. It's convenient to put it in the back. It can double as a buffer between the neighborhood. It's not for the gopher tortoises. It's to maximize profit on this property through intensification. So the receiver sites include, like I said, Gator Hole, which is full, though we can't get straight information. Bob James, potentially. There are waif sites throughout the county that can accept, but this is an intact, probably healthy population. When gopher tortoises are relocated, and this is according to the master's work of Julie Ross, who's a teacher over at Lehigh Senior, when she did her master's thesis on gopher tortoises, it was 50% deaths. So it's not a good scene to take a healthy population of gopher tortoises up to a reclaimed site up in Arcadia. We want to see opportunities for coexistence, and this is an ideal opportunity for coexistence on this parcel. It's so unfortunate that, again, this comes down to what the development community wants, rather than what is the best opportunity for the broader community and what are responsibilities to the kids who are living right there. Now, I'm just looking over my notes quickly. I have some questions to
Okay,
pose.
We're gonna take note of the questions. and
Yes.
then At the conclusion of your testimony, when we go back to staff and the applicant, they will address the issues raised as appropriate.
Just before I get into the question, I just want to say one thing. It is so hurtful to me, to be learning. It's always a journey, right? We're all on a journey together. And recently, through my efforts with the Eastleigh Wildlife Stewardship Group, which is developed to try to address these issues of the diminishment, destruction of wildlife habitat in Lee County, to be standing here before you today talking about a population of 24 burrows up to 34 gopher tortoises and what is being proposed. It just feels like that we are going back in time and I'm in an episode of The Dark Crystal or something. I just know that we can do better as a community than what we're seeing here. So here are my questions. When was the oil well installed? I did not see that. On the sign for the oil well, it said Lehigh Park. So it seems like perhaps that this was maybe intended, as it rightly should be, for a park. Are we sure that through the plugging of that well, that some sort of testing, environmental testing, etc., did we need to let the FDP know, or, we're plugging up an oil well, what's required there? I'm not sure. This is why it's a question. Is there any kind of Lee County policy, FWC policy, FDP policy, U.S. Fish and Wildlife policy about moving forward on developments when violations are present and unresolved? I want to know what sort of permitting is required. I know we mentioned an ERP, possibly ERP. We heard from the stormwater person. So I'm assuming that there's definitely going to be some interaction with South Florida Water Management District. I'm assuming it's not a water use permit, so that would be, I guess, probably the ERP. Permitting with the FDP, with that nexus with our indigos, our threatened species, our habitat destruction, our violations, and FWC. The boroughs registering those with the FWC survey, reporting those in good faith as they should have already been historically and current. What sort of protocol or methodology was done for the placement of the indigenous preserve in terms of evaluating the native communities that were there, going, you know what, how can we work in harmony with this vast resource that happens to be on this property? So looking at that methodology. What coordination occurred with FWC in this plan? I would assume with all of these gopher tortoises and gopher tortoises being destroyed with the land clearing, there had to be some interaction, right? Because, I mean, for instance, with the survey that we just did on the 15th, the FWC came out and wrote a violation when it was discovered that there was land clearing happening over in Lehigh Acres. So I'm assuming that that was reported to FWC as it should have been. What sort of coordination is occurring with Bike and Ped, with the MPO to make sure that these kids have safe way to get to school, moving across this property, that's being addressed? I know it is addressed other places. I've read it in Collier County, looking at some of their development regarding schools. The coordination, what sort of a coordination has occurred between South Florida Water Management District, the FDP, any conservation organizations? For instance, Wildlands Conservation is well known for their outreach regarding closing the enforcement gaps. So I would think that, working with those agencies would be documented in part of this process in coordination with the school district, with the parent-teacher association at Sunshine Elementary, the local community. What I would like to know what environmental testing for PFAS, benzenes, whatever is typical with oil wells and dumping, illegal dumping that occurs. I want to know what that is, what the remediation following that environmental testing would be, as follow-up to these violations and that use as oil well and plugging. Given the illegal dumping, the oil well, I think that there needs to be surveillance and testing done with no cost to the surrounding residents. If there's any PFAS violations, anything shows up in those wells, for them to go, they have a program that at no cost to the surrounding community will put them onto public supply of water, which is apparently available at this parcel. Provisions for, since we know that we've had illegal dumping as well as oils on this site, provisions to keep that dust from getting up into the air, to protect the surrounding residents as well as the nearby school from those impacts. In more detail, the construction contingencies that would be involved on this in this process, including any dewatering that might be anticipated as well. Just in more detail, we have a site that is so sad because it has such rich environmental resources, and who would know? You know, that's the beautiful thing with gopher tortoises, is they really do allow a community to live in coexistence. And this is a great, I mean, this is a wonderful population, a wonderful location, but yet we have people who are being disrespectful and illegally dumping, and we have an uncleaned up oil well site that's sort of left in limbo, like nobody knows who even owns this thing. We have an unclear chain of title on this property, like who knows, you know, they're not the bad guys, who's the bad guys? Nobody's the bad guys, but no one seems to care about holding anyone responsible. And this is sort of like really paints the picture of where we are in this moment in time. How do we move forward in a community? Do we just continue to ignore the mess of transportation and not coordinate with the agencies? Do we not acknowledge the pollution that has been caused by the mismanagement and just let people scot-free off by changing ownership of a parcel? Or do we truly develop this community responsibly? Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. That concludes the sheets that I had in my bin for public input. Is there any other member of the public present that would like to speak that did not complete the public participation form? All right, then I'm going to close public input. I'm going to go back to the parties. I would like to take a 10-minute break if that's okay with everyone, and we'll resume at, let's make it 2:35. Thank you.
What was that guy's name? The guy, the Cherry Street guy.
Because we were moving.
I caught his name.
I didn't write it down.
I got Deborah's.
Because Cape Coral might be.
Yeah, I just wrote down public. That doesn't help.
And the environmental consultant to look at the carrying capacity and then go from there. Because she's saying Cape Coral allows for the
There was a spill. in
tortoises to be
2017.
moved and preserved on
knows?
site or penned.
Okay. So was it cleaned up or what happened?
Are you done, Mom? Are you coming, Mom? Oh,
And so
Okay.
goes through the permit process.
So that was, because remember we had two different contracts.
To be able to do that.
So we had phase one,
Working
the
on a
original.
residential home.
This is the,
And you
this
have
was
a
the phase
tortoise,
one
and
and
you want
the.
them to be you can silt fence it off from the impacts.
someone's gotta get it.
Because we do that
From
up
a liability standpoint, you don't want to
North
close up your
North
property.
Right.
on the barriers, we do that. And all barrier islands, just so you know, require a veg permit no matter what you are.
Because the one I'm sitting on.
So I just wanted to get that straight.
Yeah, I mean,
with
I've
you on the
seen,
code.
you know, on-site preserve out in Eastleigh.
The clientele is not as big as a 400,000.
You saw what?
You know, where they take the fence and they make a little area.
But the 2.9, 3.1.
Not everybody.
If you're not gonna impact within the protection zone, then you can do that.
Right.
But you can't
So if
pin
you're
'em
like,
and
say if
then
you're
relocate.
25 feet away from where any land clearing, you can make a little preserve area.
You're not gonna impact it.
Right, and then.
But you have, it all goes through your FWC, it takes one.
Okay.
That'll be
got
The
you.
veg permit that we issue is not gonna go into, because FWC is in charge of all that.
So, because that's kind of important, that people realistically know that if they're away from that 25 feet, that they could keep them on site. Because folks love their gopher tortoises, right?
If you're really worked up about, you need to get with FWC to join with them to do this
I
education
have, I
thing.
called, I mean, 3 times.
They don't
last
have the
week.
staff a lot of times for this, but the outreach that needs to happen,
I know that.
because they've been cut so badly, but there might be somebody that can carve out
Sure,
time
I
to be
mean,
able to do
that's why we put
something.
in a grant, you know, that's why we've been
Right.
like all on this, because we don't.
Where's that one?
It's really hurtful. And you have folks that are literally having to stand in front of tractors, even when they call you guys, even when they call FWC, and they say they're documented burrows, they come home from work, and everything is.
The only thing that we can do is issue a violation from clearing land without a permit if a permit's required. We can't issue a permit for
Or a
impacted
30-day
tortoises.
stop to allow them to maybe claw their way out.
Well, we don't even do that because we don't have a code to
That's
hook it.
FWC that
We
does the
have to
30-day
have a
stop.
code to hook it to do a violation. Like on this site, this is a violation to their zoning, their 06 zoning, land clearing without a permit, and then they had nuisance accumulation. So that's all hooked to code. I cannot do anything about a site-specific gopher tortoise because
So we felt like, you know,
Yeah, he thinks.
an ordinance for Gopher Tourist Day.
yeah,
That's a step forward, but that's certainly not gonna fix it.
no. But it's a step.
It's a step. And, you know, Wildlands Conservation has offered to take their existing model,
One in our
you
community.
know, and then.
And the thing, and I don't know, I'm not gonna say this, but on the record, but there used to be where if a private developer could not move tortoises
We're getting
in
ready to-
Conservation 2020 land.
We're getting ready to start. If everybody could take your seats, please.
For the Bob Janes thing and all of
We're
that.
getting ready to start. If everybody could take your seats, please.
Thank you.
I feel so much better. I always get stiff up here.
here's Sunniland and Lee. Terry is just to our east right here.
And you're saying that Terry Street connects to Gunnery at some point?
No, this is Fourth right here.
This is Fourth.
Fourth Street connects to Gunnery.
Yeah.
Fourth is a parallel road to Lee Boulevard on the south side.
And what is your point you're trying to make with
But
that?
there's multiple ways out on the south side along 4th Street. There's multiple other connections to Lee Boulevard if you travel along 4th Street to get back to Lee Boulevard, to multiple other full median openings, unsignalized, but yes, Lee Boulevard is a very busy corridor, so it is difficult to make left turns out during the peak times. Obviously, we're not disputing that fact. Unfortunately, Sunniland is a T intersection from the north, so there's no, at this point, if a signal goes in there, there's no fourth leg to the south that will provide any connection. At this point, there's private property on the south side that won't provide any connection to 4th Street to the south. So, but that will provide some gaps. Obviously, the signal there will provide some gaps that will allow traffic to turn. But again, I can't speak for Lee County DOT, but I know I'm working on a project further to the west that as the Lee DOT does monitor their roadways, and they do modify median openings as dictated by accidents. So if there is an accident history, they will go and close some full median openings as dictated by accidents. Just as Jillian indicated, there was an accident history developing at Sunniland, so they all start looking at it. Hopefully, as our project progresses, and we are working with Lee DOT, and again, I will get with Rob and Jillian this week, and as we leave the record open to modify that language, I am confident we'll be able to reach an agreement on that language.
If Sunniland is signalized,
Yes.
do you believe that median opening at Terry will remain a median opening, or will that be closed? Or is it not possible to tell?
That's something that we'll have to look at. But then again, that'll be up to DOT.
It seems as though the distance isn't that far, although it's hard with an aerial to get true perspective on what that separation is.
Yeah, it isn't. Unfortunately, because Sunniland, again, because it's a T intersection and only serves the north side, Terry Street really doesn't have any impact on the north side of Lee Boulevard. The signal and everything that impacts is further to the west. So,
So
the
your
turn lanes and so forth, what we do will be to our west.
And your point is that since 4th Street connects to Gunnery, it operates as like a reverse frontage road?
Yes. There's other options available for those drivers. And again, as you indicated, right turns, U-turns, you can turn right and do a U-turn at several locations even before you get to Sunshine at the light. But it is difficult to turn left out onto Lee Boulevard from either side during peak times due to the heavy volumes on Lee Boulevard at an unsignalized location. I guess was there anything else
No,
from the
that was
public?
it, unless the hearing examiner has any other traffic questions, but that was the one raised by the public.
Thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
We will call Ms. Marvin.
Other than the out parcels, are there any prospective developments underway for the larger parcels?
We have the representative of the contract purchaser here, but that isn't what I was going to ask her. The question was raised about whether there's any contamination from the oil well, and I was going to ask, did you perform a phase 1?
We did. We have 2 phase 1 reports.
Please state your name for the record.
Sorry, Dorinda Marvin, representative of WMG. There are 2 phase 1 reports. There's one for the larger parcel that had no RECs, and there was a separate phase 1 for the oil well parcel that had a historical REC from an older oil spill. with information about how that had all been corrected, the corrective action that the state had accepted.
Okay, so the oil well parcel had a history of contamination, which was remediated. Is that what your
Correct.
testimony means?
Yes, ma'am.
And the larger parcel outside the oil well site had an environmental audit, and that showed
No, no RECs.
no contamination.
Correct.
Just, I want to urge you to use like common English terms, because the public doesn't understand what these abbreviations
Okay,
mean.
sorry.
Thank you.
As a potential future developer, did you want to respond to what you're working on, or
Yeah.
is it premature?
Sure, sure. There has been more interest in the out parcels. On the larger parcels, one of the issues we run into is it has taken quite a while to go through this entire process, and to be able to tell a tenant when you would be able to deliver that parcel. I think Beth has said that there were at least 2 out parcel users came forward for informal pre-app conferences.
Right, but the question I'm trying to figure out is, you know, the timing of triggering the restoration of the site to abate the code violations and the implementation of this signalization agreement. I'm trying to get a handle on the timing of both, but more importantly, the restoration effort. And it seems to me what applicant is seeking is not to have to commence that during development of the out parcels, and to delay that to the development of the larger parcels. So I'm trying to get a better idea on whether, is there something in the works underway for these larger parcels, or is it this is speculation at this point, and we're looking at potentially years before this would be accomplished?
Our intent coming into this process was to first establish the infrastructure, which would be the roadway, the improvements on Sunniland, the utility extensions that would go along with the abatement before any of those users were coming in. That was the plan.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So what you just said there was the infrastructure, the utilities, the roadway work, the abatement for both parcels, or whatever was coming in, you knew that you needed to start the process for infrastructure?
I would say before today, it was our understanding everything would be tied together. So it was our assumption that the obligation would be to do it all at once. Discussion today has been possibly separating those to abate them at 2 different times. So that was a bit of a change in circumstance.
But if the intention is to improve the site, road and utilities to serve both of the larger tracks, what's the barrier to addressing the violation at that time then? As part of your backbone infrastructure, so to speak?
don't-
I don't think there is. I think the
There's-
management system
Right.
and the vegetation all part of that. I don't want to speak.
Yeah, I don't believe that there is one.
Because right now, how the condition is written, it's tied to a limited development order. So the limited development order would come in, and I'm just speaking to the abatement, and it would show the abatement plantings. It would, if they happen to be located into a dry detention area that then could be designed as part of that LDO that would come in, it would show all that. That would get planted, it would get the certificate of completion, compliance, and the monitoring would start on that. Meanwhile, you could have a development order riding simultaneously with the LDO on an out parcel, possibly McDonald's or whatever and then that DO for that use could not be issued until the CC, the certificate of compliance, is issued on that LDO. That's the purpose of that condition as it's written today, right now. And so what I'm hearing now is, because in my testimony I said we have 2 violations on 2 separate pieces, we would have to have we could do 2 separate conditions, but then that would allow the applicant to come in on the east piece with a development order, with the infrastructure and all the abatement, and then the piece to the west would sit until an infrastructure DO came in because we had a user.
But if they improve Sunniland, that impacts both halves of the property. So in my mind, that should trigger the abatement of the violation along the north boundary.
So then both, because we have a separation, we have two different basins on a district permit.
I understand that, but there's one road serving both parcels. And if they're gonna be installing utilities and improving the road that services both parcels,
Yep.
and to my way of thinking, that should trigger the abatement of the violations on both sides. That way you've got that addressed and development can move forward. And this area has an opportunity to get established, right? Provide the screen and the open space necessary to support the project. And we don't have these violations with this question of when exactly is this happening? Is it the DO on the big parcel that's gonna trigger it? Is it just some floating, oh, when you feel like applying for an LDO, that's when it's gonna be handled? Because I can tell you right now, that second scenario, I do not support. I wanna have a definitive timeline. So if what you're suggesting is out parcel to the west triggers the need to do the abatement on the north end.
What I want is what's in the condition as it stands today, and that is a limited development order to come in for the whole entire thing to show the abatement.
Well, I like that too, but if what the testimony that I just heard is their first step is to improve Sunniland and put in the infrastructure before they start marketing for these large parcels, then it seems to me it should be tied with that, yes?
Yes, that's what I think we're envisioning. Rather than a two-step process to get to the same place, because we want to avoid the problem, again, that the restoration is going to occur in the dry detention. So you've got to do the infrastructure at the same, the backbone infrastructure at the same time you do the
You're gonna have to
abatement.
design this dry detention area to support maximum development potential, just to abate the violations and have that north area taken care of, correct?
That,
I mean, I think that falls to Brent, but.
We
now
have.
you've gone past my,
We need Brent, because in our conversations at our break, it was that because the district permit is set up in different basins, because of Sunniland splitting it, that it could be developed separate. But what I'm hearing now is we could have one DO come in for the whole entire thing that we're looking at here, and that whole entire DO would have the infrastructure for both sides.
Okay, so Brent Addison for the record. So there definitely has been a little bit of back and forth today as we've been talking. What I had envisioned up until this conversation started was that, as we talked about, we do the left side and the right side. I'm not going to get into east and west, but we do the left side. The first development order on either one of those properties would trigger the abatement improvements for the left side or the right side respectively,
Including an out parcel?
including an out parcel. We were fine with that condition.
And access on Sunniland without improvements is gonna be sufficient to accomplish all that work?
No, and I don't think, according to what Dorinda said, the client's rep, or the client, excuse me, is the intent is to come in and build the infrastructure. But we can, and maybe that's where it went a little bit sideways, we can do the infrastructure for each side independently. We would come in and improve Fifth Street, which was one of the concerns. We would improve Fifth Street within the limits of our development to make sure that it meets county standards, extend water, extend sewer, and then provide drainage connections from the south to the north on the left side. And we can do that also independently on the right side, which was what like I said, where I thought we were headed after our previous meeting.
So under your scenario, it's triggered by the first DO on the out parcel,
The first DO on the property.
on the property. So that could either be development of an out parcel, or the DO that accomplishes the road improvement to Fifth or Sunniland.
Sure. I mean, we're gonna, what we were saying is to do the plantings in the dry detention areas, we're gonna have to fill or maybe excavate, I don't know. We have to look at the elevations when we get the models done. So, but there's gonna have to be work that's done on that, and that's gonna require a development order to actually go in and fill on the property.
Right, not an LDO, an actual
Correct.
DO.
Correct.
Right.
So That's why I'm saying, and I think I'm speaking for the client here, but if it's an out parcel, that any DO, so you don't have that timeframe. It's gonna have to be done, but ideally, you go in and do the whole infrastructure for the left side or the whole infrastructure for the right side, or we might do both. But right now, they're two separate pieces of property, and we don't know.
I
how
heard
it's gonna be
testimony
developed.
earlier that there's an interest on the west side for out parcel, and there's also interest on the east side for an out parcel. So, under your scenario, west parcel comes in, left side parcel comes in for a DO for whatever, Jack in the Box, McDonald's, whatever. That's gonna trigger improvement to Fifth, improvement to Sunniland, and restoration on the left side.
Well, it's going to trigger it to the extent of the impact of that development. I mean, you have to, when we come in, we have to come in and do turn lane analysis and things that I'm not, that's Ted's department, but we're going to have to look at it. But I don't think my client is averse to doing that at the same time.
As the first development order for the out parcel on the left.
Correct. They're shaking their heads.
Let's get this done, right?
We agree. That's why we're here.
So now let's talk about the right side.
Yep.
I thought I heard that there's interest on the right side as well, one of the out parcels, dollar store, Nordstrom's, whatever it is, okay? They're gonna come in, and that's what's gonna trigger whichever one comes in first. The right side, and potentially infrastructure along Sunniland.
Correct.
And Fifth Street on the west side, or east side.
Correct.
Does your condition read that way? Because I didn't feel
No,
that
the
way.
current condition does not, but what I said in my testimony is it would be two separate conditions. The first condition would be tied to the left side, the other condition would be tied to the right side, with the VIOs cited in them, because there's two separate violations, and then what is required.
So then what does the DO come in for the infrastructure up Sunniland, which is gonna include road improvement and utility extension and potentially drainage, I don't know.
Well, anything on Sunnyland is going to be associated with the on-site DO. It's going to be an off-site improvement of the on-site permit to the, if we work on the left side, we potentially have to do off-site improvements that'll have to be bonded and right-of-way permits and things like that. So
Even for just an out parcel though?
potentially, I mean, it depending on how it, what the out parcel is and what has to be done. We have to be able to have access to a county road that meets standards.
Let me ask a question that might make this easier. A lot of times when you have an out parcel, it drains into the major road right of way. But if we go back to Brent's water management, this site flows north, which is unusual for, we usually see it flow a different way. So if he's, it seems it doesn't matter where you develop, the water's going north and you have to deal with the pre-treatment and all the things that are required before you discharge it into that canal.
Correct. So we would have to install drainage to the Angelfish Canal to the north.
So it wouldn't go directly to the drainage ditch on the left side and go up to Angelfish that way? Would that be a way to bypass having to do the improvements to Sunniland?
I mean, that's not the way we've intended the design.
But as long as you're out there, let me ask you a question. I think it was Ms. Wilkinson who was concerned that the development of this site was going to have an impact on her private well. Can you address that?
So, as I stated earlier in the presentation, we have a letter of availability from FGUA for water and sewer, and that's where we would be tying in for our connections to that. And that letter has since been updated to, that was the other question, it's been updated to reflect the correct amount of.
What that means is the source of your water is not the groundwater underneath these residential wells, but from the water plant
Central water system, yes.
that gets pumped in from there. So there should be no interaction between the two. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. That's, we would install a well for drinking water.
Anything else?
No, that's it. Recall Mr. Owen.
Okay, so in terms of drafting this condition, Mr. Owen, please come forward. I'm inclined toward the split AB on the sides. I'm inclined toward first DO, whatever it is, for whatever side it happens on is gonna trigger the restoration there. To me, it seems so economy of scale, you just do the whole thing at once, both sides, right? You're out there, you're mobilized, but I don't know how big the job is, and I'm just saying, we can split it in half and do it that way. But I would really like to see these get abated, like, right at the front end.
My concern is when the sorry, Paul. My concern is when the out parcel comes in, it's considered a small project. And small projects get looked at internally, surface water management review, not a district permit. And so you have to demonstrate on-site pretreatment and not an overall infrastructure, backbone infrastructure for surface water management. So the scope of that first DO in the condition must read that it's for the entire site. Because properties come in all the time that are small and they're part of a larger PD and they want to go in, but they don't want to hook up and do the whole infrastructure permit for stormwater management. So they want to do their own little detentions and everything else. And then when the overall, what would be considered back in the day, the anchor parcel comes in, everything else will come in. That's my concern, which.
But if you word the condition to
Correct.
say, little parcel comes in, gets reviewed as a little parcel, it still has to take care of the restoration area on the north end to abate the code violation, then that becomes a condition of the development order approval, correct?
Correct. In the detention that needs to be designed for the backbone infrastructure is where the abatement trees are going. So it's just all a matter of how we word this thing so that it doesn't get hung up in DO. We'll do it. We've got 2 weeks. It'll get done.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Paul Owen with Owen Environmental Consulting. So I just want to just briefly go back in time and talk about the clearing, what happened with the clearing. So I was working for the previous property owner after the violation occurred. From what I understand, what happened was he was approached and told that he needed to take care of this issue on his property. There were homeless camps and there were crimes being committed. So he was advised to clear the property to solve these problems. He was unaware, didn't know what he had to do, completely messed up, had a violation. That's what happened. So, all right, so regarding the gopher tortoises and the Game Commission, there is no active investigation. We've got an email, it's on the record, given to staff, and it is not an issue. When they come forward with the individual project, out parcel or whatever it is, and there's a tortoise within 25 feet of what they're going to impact, which is very likely, we will get a Game Commission permit, and it will be done properly.
The gopher tortoises were mainly on the east side of the property.
They're, sorry.
Go ahead, no.
They're
Can
on,
you bring up your slide? Is that possible?
it's possible, but I'm not, probable, we'll see. Yeah, you have to turn it on.
Hang on, I'm working on it. I don't know where it is, you'll have to,
I'll flip there.
you're in control now.
All right, we're all in trouble. There we go, all right. So the gopher tortoise burrows are shown here, which is part of my restoration plan and was submitted. So we've always known where these burrows were, which we surveyed and located and submitted to the county. I got lost. What question was I answering?
When is the restoration, when is the relocation of the tortoises going to happen? Is it going to happen all at once, or is it going to happen when that out parcel goes and the next out parcel goes?
Exactly. As each come in and they need to get within 25 feet, we'll get a separate permit to relocate those tortoises.
Okay, so that is the basis of the reevaluation of the site with each development order, because gophers may leave, gopher tortoises may come on, and so you're going to have, this is what we have at this moment. And the condition that's proposed does not permit the plowing under of these burrows without trying to relocate the turtles, right? The turtles will be excavated, they will be taken to state, federal approved recipient site that I'm sure has been vetted or what have you, and
Highly regulated. The Game Commission follows up, there's conditions. If things go bad, the mitigation recipient site loses its license. Prior to each one of these parcels coming in for a new permit, we've got to do another 100% gopher tortoise survey. 100% of those sites will be surveyed. We'll find every one of those burrows, we know what we're looking for, and we'll get a permit.
so even the out parcel on the lower left side, even though there's no gopher tortoise there today, they come in for a DO on their small site, that's still gonna get looked at.
We'll do an 80% survey when that's wetlands. This corner, for an example, that's a wetland site. But we'll still look at it. We'll still do the 80% regular protected species survey that's required by the county. And if we see any signs, of course, we'll look and find them, because it's in the client's best interest to find them and get a proper permit.
All right, and there was a reason why these tortoises couldn't be relocated to the restoration area? Was that because the timing of the completion of the restoration area was in question, or the restoration area is not large enough to accommodate the population?
It's regulated by the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. That is the only agency that regulates gopher tortoises, not the county, not the city, the Game Commission. Their rules are very strict, since the gopher tortoises were uplisted in 06 or 07, I can't remember. But you can't relocate tortoises on site without going through a bunch of extra hoops. It's a minimum of 25 acres, and it has to be able to support the new tortoises. If you've got tortoises that are already there, they don't want you to overpopulate it. And in a situation like this, it wouldn't be appropriate to keep tortoises on this site, because it's surrounded by roads. There's animals, there's people.
It's not ideal. It's already impacted habitat.
It is not ideal. The interactions that are happening are not healthy for tortoises on this site.
Okay. Our next witness is Mr. Jalisi.
For the record, Dan DeLisi.
Mr. Jalisi, there's a concern, I believe it's Ms. Wilkerson, about whether or not there's adequate buffers. Can you address whether or not her property will be buffered, and whether people will be able to drive down her road from this site?
Yeah, on the master concept plan, we noted a buffer at this location. In the staff report and the conditions, there's a buffer requirement, condition 10B. I think, Beth's testimony went through what's required, and she had said that there's no buffer required because the definition of abutting and the mixed use overlay and all of that sort of stuff. But what we had discussed during the zoning process and what's reflected in her staff report and conditions is complying with the Lehigh Acres buffer guidelines, which require a very specific buffer in 33-1405, which is 25 feet in width, 37 trees per 100 linear feet, 33 ground covers, a double hedge row. So, the double hedge is going to prevent people from crossing anyways, but it's a pretty intense buffer.
Okay, so what the testimony is short term. Most of the land development code would excuse a buffer along this western boundary. However, the Lehigh Community Plan trumps other provisions in Chapter 10 that would otherwise require some buffer, and you're complying with the Lehigh buffer?
Yeah, so Beth's testimony was the mixed use overlay trumps the Lehigh plan. It doesn't matter what the requirement actually is in the land development code, we are still providing a buffer. So regardless of what trumps what, and Ms. Workman's testimony that a buffer is not required at all, we are still providing a buffer, and county staff is still requiring us to provide a buffer. So I get why there was confusion, but there is going to be a buffer there.
And this buffer is going to consist of trees and bushes. It's going to be 25 feet in width, and your testimony is that that would serve as a barrier from people traversing back and forth, yes?
Yes.
Yes, this is an enhancement. This is an
Okay, right.
enhancement.
In addition, there is this drainage, it's not a canal, it's my understanding from the testimony. There's some kind of drainage swale.
Yeah, it's a Lamsa ditch. I mean, it's, you know,
On your property, not on your property?
it's owned by Lamsa, I believe.
So a separate tract.
Yeah.
So they would have to traverse this ditch, large or small, whatever it is,
Yeah.
and then traverse this buffer
Yeah.
to access whatever is going on your site on foot.
It'd be easier just to go along Fifth Street. Okay, so that was the buffers.
Well, and there's a concern that whatever we're gonna do, that we're not gonna get input from the public. But it's my understanding in the Lehigh Community Plan that at the time of DO, you must have another public information meeting, and those are held at Lamsa. Is that your understanding?
That's where, yes, the Lehigh Architectural Design Review Board holds public meetings for development orders as well.
So that'll be, the gentleman who was concerned we wouldn't have that review, there's no need to be concerned.
That's correct.
And there's a concern expressed, and I believe in the hearing center, about coordination with the school.
Yeah, so the applicant is, if we build residential units on this parcel, the applicant's more than happy to talk to the school about some sort of a pedestrian connection. I think we all just need to keep in mind that there is again, a canal that runs north-south here that you'd have to cross. But, you know, those are all coordination aspects with both Lamsid, who operates and owns the canal, and the school board. But the issue is not on the applicant's willingness side. The applicant's more than happy to do it. They don't control every aspect of this.
Thank you.
I didn't have any other questions unless you had a question that we have left lingering.
No, does that conclude your rebuttal, so to speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Dan? Beth, is there any additional testimony you'd like to place on the record based on?
I just have a couple small, just very small things about FDEP, the district, about the violations, if that's okay, and then I have the dates for you, for the BOCC. So I've been working on this property for a very long time through the violation process as well as the zoning. Code enforcement, Lee County Code Enforcement, anytime we get a violation that has impacts to wetlands or species, we work with those agencies. So our code enforcement staff that's been working on this and going out and checking up on the property has been in contact with the South Florida Water Management District, followed their process through the removal of the nuisance material out there, as well as the clearings that have happened with the refuse that was left behind, as well as FWC for the impacts to gopher tortoises. So it's not like there's no collaboration or we're not coordinating. We are. And we also do interagency meetings with our zoning applications. So in those collaboration meetings, we have the district, we have FDEP, we have FWC, and the Conservancy usually is on the call. And we discuss these issues.
So the abatement protocol that's outlined in each violation is a result of this interagency collaboration in determining what would need to be accomplished to abate?
Correct. For instance, the district wanted the applicant or the previous owner to go in and remove the logs. Well, We had FWC, where we had active gopher tortoises still out there. So we had to collaborate on that. And then we had protected species vegetation-wise that needed to be saved too. So how are you going to do that? We have to work together. So it's not like we're out working against each other. We actually work together, and there's documentation in the code enforcement files as to emails or site visits or joint site visits. So we do that, and then how we decide what is an indigenous preserve and what is not is all laid out in the definitions of indigenous vegetation, as well as in 10-701 of the Land Development Code. What is an indigenous species? So those were the two things I heard on that, and the cutoff date for going to the board is May 24th.
So any recommendation issued by May 24th will be heard by the board prior to their July recess.
To make the June 19th BOCC meeting
May 24th.
prior to July recess.
So June 19th is the last board zoning hearing.
Correct.
Before the recess.
Correct. That's all I have.
Thank you. I'm going to look at the calendar because I want to give you an idea of the time frame that I would urge you to get me information so that I can meet this deadline of May 24th. Now, if May 24th is not that important to you, please convey that to me as well. But I will endeavor to get something out by the 24th. Today is the 25th. I would like to receive all revised master concept plans and revised conditions by end of business on May 10th. If I receive it by May 10th, that will allow me enough time to finalize the recommendation so that it gets to the board in time to make that June 18 meeting. But you're driving the bus, not me. I will allow as much time as you feel as though you need.
No, we hear you loud and clear.
I want to accommodate everyone. If there's an urgency to have this heard quickly, then I'll endeavor to meet that need.
I think 2 weeks is more than enough time, right?
And it's going to take a little time for me to get the transcript for this. So I'm not going to finalize anything until I have the transcript, and that could be a week.
That was a non-committal look.
It's up to you guys.
When do you need her transcript by in order to make that date?
Well, I will say, without intending to complain or brag, that I am completely caught up with all my cases. So whichever one is ready first is going to get my attention and be completed. So if you want to expedite the transcript, that's up to you. Otherwise, what do you think, a week, 10 days?
Usually it's
10 days.
Okay,
Without an expedite.
okay. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to recap before I close the hearing. The written record is going to be left open for revised conditions and deviations.
And the MCP.
That includes renumbering the only deviation to deviation 1, a revised master concept plan, preferably stamped and received by staff, that reflects the location of the deviation and anything we discussed today regarding what might affect the site plan. And this revised conditions will include a redrafting of the violation condition and a sharpening of the language regarding the signalization agreement, which I understand you're going to work together on. Conditions 8 and 12, I believe. And that's it.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone, for coming. I appreciate the detailed presentation. Thank you for a very complete applicant's narrative and staff report. And I will leave the record open until end of business on May 10th for the items that I've requested, and please feel free to provide them ahead of time. Thank you.